of releasing hostages. We were disappointed that the last one ended. We were disappointed that Hamas reneged on its deal to produce women who it's holding hostages, and we would welcome a resumption of a pause and the resumption of a release of hostages, not just women, but other hostages, and ultimately the release of every hostage that Hamas is holding.
Are you seeing any indication that either party is willing to come back to the table, or are you sticking with the U.S.'s position that Hamas is holding up a resumption of these talks?
Again, I just don't think it's productive for me to speak at all to negotiations in this regard. Alex.
Thank you, Matt. I have a couple of topics. Please bear with me. Let me give
I always do.
Reaction. Thank you, sir.
I shouldn't say always. I mostly do.
Let me give a fresh reaction on today's prisoners exchange between Azerbaijan and Armenia. 2 points there. What role, if any, you guys have played in this, given the timing of it? Assistant Secretary was in the region. And secondly, do you view this as part of a broader effort to move the needle in the peace process?
So the Undersecretary, or the Assistant Secretary was in the region. This is something that we have actively encouraged in talks with both governments. We welcome the return of the Armenian and Azerbaijani detainees earlier today, and reports that additional confidence-building measures are being discussed. We will continue to work with Armenia and Azerbaijan to move the process forward. We continue to believe that peace is possible if both parties are willing to pursue it.
You made it clear last week that the Secretary is looking forward to having the ministers in town. What date did he have in mind?
Stay tuned. I'm not going to make an announcement on that from here today.
Thank you. Moving to Ukraine, if I may.
Yeah.
Does the department have any position on Hungary's blocking Ukraine European bid and also aid for Ukraine? I know your traditional position was we have no dog in it, but things are getting out of control in that part of the world.
So I will say that the United States and the EU have been resolute in standing with Ukraine. We believe now is the time to step up that support. It's vital in our national security and that of our European partners. We appreciate the EU's continued efforts to provide financial support to Ukraine and hope that the EU can quickly agree on funding for 2024 and beyond.
Broadly speaking, reflecting yesterday's conversation in this town, also what's being discussed in Europe, on the point of border issue, I don't want to drag you into domestic politics, but is there any research or any assessment going on? Is the department is doing any assessment on what will the European and American borders will look like if we allow Putin win the war against the largest country in Europe?
I'm not going to answer that question. That's a hypothetical I'm not going to get into, because we want Ukraine to win this war. And that's why we think it's so important that the United States Congress provide the security assistance that we have requested to Ukraine so it can win this war.
Thank you. My last topic, I promise. Yeah. Do you have any comment on the fresh charges against Al-Sukur Mashova in Russia and the latest developments, if there's any update on...
So I would say that we have seen those reports. We're closely following her detention. We're aware that there may be possible charges against her because we've seen those reports. Again, we have sought consular access to her. The Russian government has not provided. We will continue to insist on it. They have acknowledged her detention to us, though they have not made a formal notification. And we, as always, take seriously our commitment to assist U.S. citizens abroad, and we will continue to do that in this case.
Now that they have acknowledged it, is there any doubt in your mind that she is wrongfully detained?
It's not a determination that we have made yet, but as I have said before, with all these cases, we are constantly assessing facts and the law and making the most appropriate determination.
Thanks so much.
I wanted to ask about the member of Polish Parliament who used a fire extinguisher to snuff out lights on a menorah in the Parliament building there. I know the ambassador of Poland posted on X about this, but have you seen that video? Do you have any comment?
I have not seen the video personally. I've seen the report. Obviously, that would I think be an inappropriate action to take, but not having seen the video myself and only seen the preliminary reports, I'd refer you to the comment made by the ambassador.
It seems like a pretty blatant example of anti-Semitism.
I would say that we have, unfortunately, in the wake of October 7th, seen a dramatic rise in anti-Semitism around the world. That has been one of the unfortunate outgrowths of these attacks and the aftermath of the attack. We have made clear anti-Semitism is inappropriate in any form, just as we have made clear that Islamophobia is inappropriate in any form, and we will continue to make that clear to countries around the world. Go ahead.
Mac, I have 2 or 3 questions, a small question. Israel is the best equipped army in the world, and they have the support of mighty USA. And they're not fighting another country. They're fighting a small group of people in Gaza Strip. How come they're taking more than 2 months to win their goal? How come still it seems like they're struggling?
They are facing an enemy who has had years to dig tunnels underneath civilian population, to hide behind civilians, to arm itself, and who showed on October 7th possess, unfortunately, quite significant military capacity and quite significant ability to inflict torture upon the inflict terrorism on the Israeli people. So I think what you've seen is they are facing a very brutal, entrenched opponent, and they are well within their right to do everything they can to take on that opponent and do everything possible to ensure that October 7th is not repeated.
I have the second question I have. 3-time Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Begum Khaleda Zia, there's a media report that she was being poisoned and ill-treated while she was in government custody. Now, they're not allowing her to go abroad to have adequate treatment, and she's dying. UN already made a request for her treatment in abroad. Does America has any plan to make the same request?
Let me take that question back. Get an answer. Go ahead. Go ahead. Come on.
Thank you, Matt. I have a couple of questions on Bangladesh and one on Sri Lanka. Could you please share the State Department's stance on the investigative report by Financial Times today, which reports that Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh orchestrated a planned propaganda campaign involving fake news, fake videos, using artificial intelligence tools against the United States and Bangladesh opposition political parties in the contest of upcoming dummy election?
So we have seen the concerning use of deep fakes in election-related disinformation in Bangladesh. It's part of a worrying trend around the globe of using AI to manipulate and influence democratic processes.
6 international human rights organizations urge the international community to stand for the protection of fundamental rights in Bangladesh as the regime makes the whole country in prison ahead of so-called election, of banning political activities except election campaign from December 18. On the other hand, Bangladesh Foreign Minister Momen and his deputy claimed that they were also able to manage United States. After forming the government, he mentioned that the US will support the government. What is your response on that?
So we are deeply concerned by the reports of mass arrests of thousands of opposition members and reports of torture in prison. We urge all sides to exercise restraint and avoid violence. We urge the government of Bangladesh to work with all stakeholders to create conditions in which all may participate in the pre-election and election environment freely, without fear of violence or retribution. It is our belief that a healthy democracy benefits from a variety of voices speaking freely, engaged in dialogue and discussion, and an exchange about the issues of the day.
On Sri Lanka, in a bipartisan resolution of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, urged the government of Sri Lanka to listen to and respect the rights of the Sri Lankan people by addressing corruption, ensuring justice for human rights abuse, and holding free, fair local and provincial elections without further delay. What is your comment?
So we always support accountability for corruption and, of course, the holding of free and fair elections. Go ahead. Yeah.
The Pakistani army chief is in Washington seeking U.S. support against alleged terrorist safe havens in Afghanistan. What kind of support is the U.S. willing to offer Pakistan, and will drone strikes be considered?
So I'm not going to comment with respect to his meetings, other than that generally speaking, we look forward to partnering with the Pakistani government on regional security and defense cooperation. We have taken a number of steps to partner with them this year on anti-terrorism activities. In March, the United States and Pakistan held a high-level counterterrorism dialogue to discuss the shared terrorist threats facing our two countries and to develop strategies to cooperate in critical areas such as border security and countering the financing of terrorism. And we fund several counterterrorism capacity building programs in Pakistan focused on law enforcement and justice, and we look forward to carrying out that work. Yeah, go ahead.
CBS spoke with the family of Ryan Corbett, an American who's been wrongfully detained by the Taliban, has been held captive there for 16 months. We were told as part of our reporting that Special Representative Tom West just met with Taliban representatives in Doha. And per the State Department's readout of that meeting, detainees, including Ryan, were a central focus of the conversation. A Taliban readout didn't mention detainees at all. So we're curious how willing you believe the Taliban to be to engage on the topic of detainees at this moment.
So I don't want to try to assess their willingness. What I will say is that, of course, we have no higher priority than the safety and security of U.S. citizens overseas. Not just in this meeting, but in previous meetings, we have continually pressed for the release of Americans detained in Afghanistan. Special Representative West did meet with a representative of the Taliban this week and pressed for the release of Ryan Corbett and other American detainees. It is something that we never lose focus on, and I say that from the secretary on down. A number of people in this building and this administration work on it. So I wouldn't want to assess their willingness other than to say it is the highest priority for us and we will continue to work on it.
One quick follow-up, because I believe the last sort of formal readout of U.S. officials' interactions with the Taliban was issued in July. How would you characterize the level, the pace, the tenor of interactions with the Taliban since that time, including in recent months?
I wouldn't want to characterize. I'm like searching for an adjective in my head. I don't think I have one to characterize, other than to say that we meet with them when it's in our interest to do so. And one of the reasons we do meet with them is we think we want to see these Americans returned, and we want to do everything in our power to do so.
Thank you.
Next time, maybe I'll think of an adjective.
Can I ask?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. No.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. You, go ahead. Not you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Right there. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know your name, but go ahead.
Eva, I'm with the Epoch Times.
Okay.
Thank you for taking my question. So yesterday, the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party issued a bipartisan policy proposal with 150 recommendations, and they are calling for a reset on the relationship with China. Specifically, some of the recommendations include restricting outbound investment and raising tariffs on goods imported from China. So I'm wondering, how much support would you perceive from the Biden administration on these policy proposals?
So I'm not going to speak with respect to those specific proposals, but we have imposed restrictions on outbound investment. We have imposed sanctions and export controls that target specific sectors of the Chinese economy when we've seen inappropriate activities. We have made clear to the Chinese government, the Secretary has made this clear, the President has made this clear, that we will continue to take those actions when it is in our national security interest to do so. But at the same time, we want the ability to work with China both on issues of mutual concern between our two countries and on broader global issues when it makes sense to do so. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I have two questions. First one, Israel has a serious plan to flood the tunnels in Gaza with seawater. This action will threaten the lives of hostages and cause environmental disaster. Do you agree with this military plan? And what are you going to do to stop Israel from this madness plan?
So I've seen the reports of that activity. I will leave it to Israel to speak to the details of its military campaigns, but I will make clear publicly the same thing we've said to them privately, that with respect to any tactic that they carry out, it should be done in compliance with international humanitarian law and in a way that is designed to maximize civilian protection.
Okay, the other question. The American administration consistently expressed its concern about the safety of civilians in Gaza. But in fact, the weapons supplied by United States are responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of civilians, most of them children, women, and elderly people. So why doesn't the United States administration put strict conditions on the use of these weapons to protect Palestinian civilians?
So there are, with respect to every weapon that we transfer not just to Israel, but to every country around the world. There are conditions on the transfer of those weapons, and we expect that they will be used in full compliance with international humanitarian law. And one of the things that we continue to engage with the government of Israel about is steps that they can take to minimize civilian harm. You've heard me talk about those steps from here today. You've heard me talk to them other days, as has the secretary, as has the president. We believe that far too many Palestinian civilians have died as a result of this conflict. We want to see Israel take additional steps to protect innocent civilians. We want to see them establish these enduring deconfliction zones and enduring pauses that are predictable, so civilians know where they can go to get out of harm's way. So civilians, so humanitarian assistants know that they can bring assistance in. I'll go back to what I've said a number of times, which is this is such a difficult problem because you have Hamas continuing to embed itself in civilian homes, in civilian infrastructure, to use civilians as human shields. But that doesn't in any way lessen Israel's burden to do everything it can to protect civilians, and that is what we are engaging with them on a daily basis to try to achieve.
Okay,
Come over here.
I'll just follow up Biden's remarks yesterday. In the same remarks, Biden said that Netanyahu has to change, and this came hours after Netanyahu said that there is a disagreement with the Biden regarding the post-Hamas Gaza. I know you don't comment on White House Biden's remarks, but
who's got a radio in the room or walkie-talkie? Sorry. I would say sorry, but it actually wasn't me interrupting. Go ahead.
Has there been any contacts with the Israelis regarding this after Biden's remarks yesterday? And what was the reaction from the Israelis? How does the U.S. plan to overcome these disagreements with the Netanyahu government?
So I'm not going to speak to any conversations that we may or may not have had since in the last 24 hours, but I'll say we have been quite clear for some time that there are steps that we think Israel needs to take that you have seen the Israeli government come out and say they're not prepared to take. And you've seen that at times. We've overcome those disagreements. You saw it when the secretary traveled to the region and wanted to achieve an increase of humanitarian assistance. The Israeli government wasn't willing to do it at first. We reached an agreement. You saw the secretary come to the region and say we want to see humanitarian pauses implemented, and the prime minister come out and say they were unwilling to do so, and then a few days later implement them. And you have seen, most notably, I think, a very disagreement between us and the government of Israel about the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. So the case that we have made to them privately, and we will continue to make publicly to them and to other countries in the region and around the world, is that there can be no lasting peace and security in the region without meeting the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people. We believe that is not just in the interests of the Palestinian people, but in the long-term security interests of the Israeli people. One of the things that you have heard the secretary say a number of times when talking about the steps that we have urged the Israeli government to take is that a lot of things we encourage them to do are not just the morally right thing to do, but are in Israel's security interests. And that's a case that we will continue to make to them.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Yesterday, the Iranian foreign minister said that, and he confirmed that his government is receiving messages from Washington weekly. But he said that this has nothing to do with Iran, and these groups who are attacking the U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria, they are defending the people in Gaza. Do you think that the Iranian government derailing your messages and they are not taking care of your messages, and they have no will to rein their groups in Iraq and Syria from attacking your forces?
So I will say that the secretary's had a number of conversations, including a face-to-face meeting in Baghdad with Prime Minister Sudani, and has been very clear on two things. One, that we expect the Iraqi government to take action against the groups that have carried out attacks against U.S. forces, and most recently against the U.S. embassy in Iraq, and that if they don't, we will not hesitate to take the actions that we need to take to defend our personnel in the region, and I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, yesterday there were a call between Secretary Blinken and Prime Minister Sudani, and
that's what I was referring to. Yeah.
Yeah, in the statement, it's been said that the Secretary noted that these groups are doing these attacks with the support of Iran. But do you aware of that? The groups that you name it in the recent statements and the Pentagon statements, they are part of the popular mobilization groups, Hashd al-Sha'bi. And these groups are funded by the Iraqi government. They're receiving this year $2.7 billion from the Iraqi budget. Have you requested the Iraqi government to cut the funds to these groups?
Again, I'm not going to speak to our private diplomatic conversations other than to say that we have made quite clear that we expect the Iraqi government to take action to hold these groups accountable.
Are you worried about
let me go here, and then we're going to wrap for today.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. No, in front of you. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, man. I know a lot of people are asking a question about Bangladesh. Do you have any new news for new sanction against Bangladesh before election on 7th of January?
I do not have any new sanctions to announce today, and it is our longstanding practice not to preview sanctions actions before we take them. And with that, I'll wrap for today. Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.